Heyo Internet. So it's been a while since we've done a walk and talk, but I do have to walk home tonight because I forgot how the buses work on a Sunday. The subject of this one is, so after you've told people what are your pronouns, I don't care, if they're hip, if they're with it, their next question is, well then how do you identify? Because people are very uncomfortable with non-specificity. There's a better word for that, but I forgot it just now. So, but how do you identify? And the answer is, I don't see identity as valid. There, I said it. Because saying I don't care doesn't seem to really answer that question fully. I sure hope you could hear me with all those cars. Alright. So, I've been thinking about this one a lot recently because I've been going to school and I've been getting called he a lot there, and I don't care. And I had an internet conversation with someone where I was just having a really hard time getting my point across. So, the discussion was about talking about, like, people from the past. People from the past who, like, passed, like women who lived as men, and it's just sort of how that all gets talked about, because we're drawing from the same small pool of existent people whose histories were recorded. So sometimes people will go back to the past and look at certain women and how they lived their lives and say, well, if they were alive today, they'd probably identify as trans. And just sort of how people feel about that. So, generally, my point of view on all that is that it doesn't matter. People do what they want, and it's not worth fighting about. So, like, have your different opinion, don't fight about it. But that's just too simple, isn't it? So, my point is, because I can see where the person I was talking about it with was coming from, saying that to say that those people would necessarily identify as trans and would identify as male these days is erasing history or something along those lines. And I can see where someone would be upset, and it doesn't matter to me personally, and I'm very willing to say, well, the fact that that doesn't matter to me doesn't mean that it doesn't matter. But if you're going to, and this is often coming from the same people, if you're going to be very sad about how all the butches are transitioning these days, then you can't quite say that none of the people that you're looking at from the past who lived as men wouldn't transition these days, now that things are very different and that is a more accessible option. Okay, so the point that I wanted to say is more about the fact that when people ask me how I identify, it's just asking, what are you? Again, you know? And I already said I don't care. And so to ask the same question again just feels like you weren't listening. When I have a very different experience through life compared to a lot of women. So when I'm asked how I identify and if I feel comfortable with the person and I get really into it, I say, well, I guess I identify as female. You know, I'm not running away from that anymore. but I also get treated a lot more like how men are treated on a day-to-day basis in a lot of my circumstances. And they'd say, that's not really an answer as to how you identify. Because it's not quite intentionally. I identify as a woman who's read as a man on the regular. And both of those things are very important and can't be erased or disentangled from each other if you want to really understand what it is that I'm getting at. My life experience, it paused, it's gonna be weird, I don't feel like re-recording. It's late at night, and I'm walking home alone, and it's gonna take me an hour, and I don't care. That's different from what a lot of women deal with. When I left for work this morning, I didn't give 2 thoughts to how my hair looked. And that's different than how a lot of women move through the world. And people call me sir. You know, I have customers at work who always call me sir and young man. I got a complaint the other day. I rolled my eyes at someone. And she left a complaint about a blonde young man. So it took them 2 days to track that back to me. And that's different than what a lot of women would handle. And I think acknowledging that is important, and it's part of how I identify, you know? I don't see it as very important because, like, so there's this crazy matrix of how people are treated in comparison to how they're presenting in the world, right? And so there's your manly-looking man people, there's your feminine-looking femme people, there's your in-between people, race comes into it, your weight comes into it, everything comes into it, how expensive your clothes are comes into it. And so, you know, and it's not simple how it is, how you're treated. And I think identity, how I identify, is mostly useful as a measure of how you are treated, or sort of the place in that matrix that you're aiming for, if that's different from how you're treated. But I'm happy with how I'm treated in society these days. I mean, outside of the fact that I live under capitalism and have to do wage labor, but I can't identify out of that one. Trying to figure out how to get home from this angle, and my hand's going really numb. It just got super cold in the last couple of weeks, and I hate it. So anyways, that's really all identity is, and I don't view it as hugely important to me. That's about it. That's all I was trying to get to. This person seemed to have a real hard time. The person I was in an internet discussion with seemed to have a real hard time with understanding that there is, that when I say my life experience is that of a mannish, more treated like men than most women are, life experience, that doesn't for me entail any part of, like, I don't know, I don't feel like that makes my also identifying with women and how they're treated and how things that affect women and the feminisms affects me. I don't think that makes that less valid for me to say that I am treated like a mannish woman. And I don't think it's invalidating towards, like, they seem to feel I'm very confused. It's turned into a fight. And I'm still really confused as to why. Because I don't get it. Because my saying that, yes, I'm a woman and I'm experienced and I'm affected by the things that affect women, but in a different way, it doesn't make me less of one, that I'm not treated like it 100% of the time. It just means that I'm treated like a woman who gets treated like a man, which is a kind of woman that's always existed. And some of us identify as male, meaning there's a spot in the Matrix for masculine acting manly people, and they're aiming to be treated more like that. That's all that means. Anyways, that was on my brains a lot these past couple of days, and this was probably a bit of a ramble, but I needed something to do to keep me busy while I'm walking home. Hope you got to see some of the sights of Late Night Eugene. Okay, bye-bye, internet laters.